Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. Before we start the agenda, I'd like to welcome you, as I've just done, and let you know that some officers will be attending online, but councillors are required to attend in person and therefore can only vote when they're here in person. And a number of planning officers will, however, be on the screen, but we also have a number of planning officers who are here in person too. Please note that the meeting is being filmed for a live stream available on the council's website, and a recording will be available after the meeting. Thank you. Right, the first item is the minutes. Is everybody happy that the minutes of the last meeting are? Thank you. And have we got any declarations of interest? Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to claim an interest out of prior determination on item number 10-109B Oxford Road. So I'll be saying something and then leaving.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No, in which case we'll go to questions, and we have none tonight. And then the first real report, which is on potential site visits. Richard Etoff's going to introduce that. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll see from the agenda, there's no new items for you. So to recap on Appendix 2, just one update for you. That's the Henley Road application 220189, which was visited by members on the 23rd of March. That's programmed for committee on the 31st of May. I'm afraid I don't have any updates for you on the other three. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask other people, I have a recollection we were supposed to be visiting D Road Fire Station site, because that will be coming at some point, and we did agree it was somewhere that members ought to see. So can we get that back on the agenda, please?
Noted. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other? Councillor Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether you could update us on the Curzon Club one, because that was an unaccompanied one with notes, but that's sort of run through several meetings now. In fact, I think I might have even asked about it last meeting. So I see it's here again. So are we going to get the notes? Are we, are we going?
Through you, Chair. Councillor Gavin, the officer is still working on this application. There's direct dialogue with the applicant on it at the moment. It may not come to committee in the end, which is the reason why you haven't been updated. I'm sorry about this, but if the application is continuing, you will get a briefing note. Sorry.
Thank you.
So you're talking about a withdrawal potentially?
Yes.
Just to be clear, thank you. Right, anything else on site visits? No, not seeing anybody, so we note all that and go on to planning appeals on page 23.
Thank you, Chair. Just no reports for you this time. Two new appeals lodged. One of them is the site directly behind the Curzon Club, so that says Land 362 Oxford Road. That's the appeal in relation to a site that previously had planning permission, and the issue is zero affordable housing, so that's a written reps appeal just on that one issue. The other one is 15 Highmead Close. It says conversion of single dwelling to two dwellings. It is actually the addition of one dwelling to the side of another dwelling, Highmead Close, Whitley. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on any of that? No, thank you. Can we note that then and go on to applications for prior approval? Steve, I think you're just going to.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add to the report. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody got any questions or comments on this one? Noted. Okay, can we note that? Thank you. And item 7 is 84 Broad Street. And Bruce Edgar's here to introduce this. Bruce.
Recently, we put a locally listed building listing on 85 to 88. This is the adjacent building and it was built about 2 years the same time. There's nothing else to add to the report.
Thank you, Bruce. And I think Councillor Rowland, you're indicating?
Right, thank you, Chair. I would like to welcome this this site onto the local list myself. The fact that it has substantial group value and that group value adding to the overall heritage value that we notice along Broad Street and assuring that that remains with us. And the fact that it's also part of an example of deliberate town planning is very, very important. And so I would be pleased to add this. And I think that also the fact that it came from a well-known local firm of architects, J.T. and W. Brown. I'd like to add a couple of points, if I could, on that. Part of the reason that we know and we're offered such rich information is courtesy of one Sidney Gold, who has recently parted this town, who wrote and parted this earth. Unfortunately, he wrote a wonderful dictionary of architects that you can find at the Berkshire Record Office, and a lovely place to go and be and to read about that. It's a very, very rich chronology and annotation of a lot of the great architecture and architects that we've had throughout the town. So I'd like to pay respect to Sidney Gold, if I could, for all of the input that he's had in recording our built heritage. The other thing I'd like to mention is that I do understand that this might be Bruce Edgar's last evening, as he will be apparently going on to another authority. I would like to thank you, Bruce, for your work, for coming on and being our first full-time conservation urban design officer that certainly has been around since I've been here. And just know how important your role is, the things that you've been able to do with the Conservation Area Advisory Committee, working in tandem with them, with the Civic Society, with the community, and with certainly counselors and pretty much everyone in the community to enhance and to pay attention to our built heritage in this town. During Bruce's tenure, I believe 10 local listed buildings have been added to our local list, and that alone is very, very critical. Mind you that over the past number of years, over 39% of the councils across this country have done away with a position such as Bruce's. And we have learned one thing during your tenure is that you are really integral into making sure that we are paying attention to the heritage in this town. So I would like to thank you, commend your work, and also commend to the council to look for, unfortunately, a replacement, but I'm sure that we'll fill the shoes very, very quickly. So thank you.
Can I endorse that, Bruce? And yes, we do need to ensure that this post is filled as quickly as possible.
I'd just like to say thank you, and I know it's a busy meeting tonight, so I won't give a response.
Yes, could we minute that, please? Thank you. And can we all show whether we agree with the recommendation? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then we go on to the first of two reports on government consultations. Julie Williams to introduce item 8 on page 51.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the next two reports are about consultations currently underway on proposals by government. This report is about proposed changes to planning application fees and the scope of applications that fees apply to. Also linked to the proposed fee increase are consultations on changes to how planning performance is measured. Paragraph 3.2 of the report provides a summary of the topics being consulted on. The ones of most interest, perhaps, are the increase in planning fees by 35% for major applications and 25% for all other applications, a doubling of fees for retrospective applications, So that means applications that are submitted after development's been completed. And remove the free go for repeat applications. Currently, if an application is determined or withdrawn, the applicant has the ability to resubmit the same application without paying an additional fee within a year. And another item is to reduce the planning guarantee from 26 weeks to 16 weeks for non-major applications. So the 26 weeks is a target that if a developer or if an application goes over that time and it hasn't been agreed between the applicant and the local authority, then the local authority may be liable to pay back the plan application fee that was paid in the first place. And then the last one that may be of more note is to improve the quality of the local authority planning service by the monitoring of more performance measures. At the moment, we're just monitored on the speed of our determination of applications, and the quality is measured in terms of the number of appeals that are allowed as a percentage of the total number of applications decided. So I can understand why they are looking to expand that to look at more meaningful ways of measuring performance and quality. In terms of the fees, it is well recognised that the current plan application fees, they were last increased in 2018. They barely cover the cost to the local authority of determining the applications. And the consultation paper describes that gap to be around 58%. So there's a lot of difference there in terms of the income we receive, but also it's recognised that as a percentage of the overall build costs, these plan application fees amount to maybe less than 1% in many cases. So in addition to the percentage increase in application fees, the consultation seeks views on doubling planning fees for retrospective applications and stopping the free second go, i.e. you'd have to pay for your second go. This report provides a summary of the proposals with a draft of officer responses provided for you at Appendix 1. I don't think there'll be many surprises in the officer reply suggested, but I am happy to answer any questions about them. It is explained why a fee for listed building consent should be considered and why the retrospective fee increase I consider should apply to household development as well. The consultation is suggesting that maybe that doesn't apply to household developments, but our experience is in fact that we get an awful lot of retrospective applications from householders when they're seeking to sell their properties and that sort of thing, and they expect us to do a very quick turnaround of that sort of historic search of applications and making a decision. So we actually think that a fee is relevant in those cases too. And officers also disagree with the change to measuring performance based on the statutory timescales. Currently, we use 8 and 13 weeks, which was introduced many years ago, and I don't think actually recognises the amount of work that goes into determining our planning application these days. There's so much more consultation goes on and more scrutiny, I would say, than they no disrespect to back in the day, but I certainly think that planning officers have to specialise. I know we have to use consultees more often, and it's a big team effort to try and get a response on an application, and to expect that to happen within 8 weeks or 13 weeks for a major application, I think is a little bit unrealistic. So if that does revert back to that, it certainly takes away the ability for us to extend the time of an application by agreement. So currently we are measured on extensions of time. And I do know, although the consultation paper says that developers say that local plan authorities are taking too long to make a decision, I am aware that many developers welcome the fact that we can continue to negotiate on a scheme and come to an appropriate decision, a better decision, rather than simply refuse at 8 or 13 weeks to avoid going beyond the time frame. So the consultation lasts for 8 weeks. It began on the 28th of February and will close on the 25th of April. The intention is to introduce the fee increase by this coming summer, but the consultation paper does say they will give more time to consider the other proposed changes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions or comments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I read through all of the paperwork, and I'm very happy to support our officers' answers to each of those in the consultation. I had one little question, and I think it's just me not understanding something. Is the 100% increase for retrospective applications 100% of the existing, or 100% after the 25% has already been added on?
It would be after the 25%
Right,
added
okay.
on. So if you imagine from the summer, the fees will all go up by 25%.
Right.
So it would be based on that.
And that'll be best. Thank you.
I'm not seeing anybody else at the moment. Oh, Councillor Lang, sorry.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, with the performance, 8 and 13 weeks, are we saying that you think it will drive the quality of the application down, and we would end up losing more appeals possibly?
I think if the local authorities are forced to improve their performance, to refuse applications that may otherwise, for the sake of a few more weeks, you could have arrived at a better solution, or a solution that could have been solved by a planning condition or something like that, then if that goes to appeal, and for which there is no fee at the moment for going to appeal, so why wouldn't an applicant do that? There is a chance that we would be found, the local authority could be found to have made, not having explored the application fully, but there'd be more sort of grounds for the applicant to persuade that the scheme is acceptable subject to a number of conditions, etc., which would take it beyond our gift to apply conditions that we would like.
Yeah, I'd hope you said I wanted that to come from an officer, not necessarily from a councillor. I will say, as I mentioned at budget the other week, we were keeping our application fees down to less than half of that of inflation. So these increases are government led. So I'd just like to make that clear. Also, in the question, in the answers to the consultation, and very much, oh, he's gone. It was relevant to Bruce Edgar. It says, what do you consider to be the greatest skills and expertise gap within local planning authorities? And the answer, local planning authorities once typically employed full or part-time expert advice on conservation and historic buildings, etc. So it just proves we need to put an advert in and get that position filled as quickly as possible. That was one for the minutes. Thank you.
Bruce is still in the audience, actually. Anybody else? Not seeing anybody else. So how are we happy to agree the recommended action on page 51? Thank you. And then the second of these papers is on page 61, Julie again to introduce the consultation on changes to the general permitted development.
Thank you, Chair. This is a simpler paper, I suppose. This consultation is on changes to the permitted development rights. So they're proposing a new permitted development right to support temporary recreational campsites. That's subject to the restriction on the number of tents and not allowing camper vans and caravans and that sort of thing. Also changes to the existing permitted development rights for solar equipment. So to provide a relaxation to allow panels on top of flat roofs, which currently aren't covered by the PD rights. Also an amendment to the existing permitted development right, which allows local authorities to undertake certain development. The idea is to extend this right to bodies that are instructed by the local authority to do the work for them. And the final one is changes to the existing permitted development right for the temporary use of buildings or land for filmmaking purposes. Again, there's suggested responses to the consultation in the appendix to that document. And also this one runs till the 25th of April, 2023. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Andrew Hornsby-Smith. Sorry, I wasn't sure if somebody else was indicating. I know, I wasn't sure if there was somebody else who'd indicated first further down.
Well, thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Chair. I appreciate it. I think, generally speaking, this is a good thing. I mean, it's we're all for encouraging solar panels. I'm not sure about the campsites, but solar panels, good. And the responses are generally ones that I support. There are a couple of queries that I've got, and most of them are logical sort of queries, really. The first is on page 66, and it's question 26, which asks, do you agree that a permitted development right for solar canopies should not apply on land which is within 10 metres of the curtilage of a dwelling house? And the suggested response is, don't know. And I think that's weak, actually. I think we would want, if we don't know, then we would want the discretion. So I think we should change that answer to yes, because we would want to determine this. We would want to have that discretion, and we'd want to determine each application on a case-by-case basis. So I would suggest, rather than saying don't know, that we actually say yes to that one. On page 67, there are three where I think it's the double negatives in the question that has thrown the officers, because the answers for the first one, question 27, do you agree that the permitted development right for solar canopies should not apply on land which is part of a site designated of a monument or within a curtilage of a listed building? And the substantive answer is we need modern additions can appear intrusive, so we need the discretion. So the correct answer is not no, it's yes. Okay, we want the discretion. Similarly, on question 28, instead of it being no, it should be yes.
Yeah.
Because it's all about this would not apply. And then on question 30, again, it should be no. The prior approval should allow consideration of these issues for safety and amenity reasons. Now, the rest of the answers I'm very happy with. I just think that someone's been thrown just in the drafting of this on those three. And the other one, which I would prefer, yes, it's the double negatives. It's the way that the government, as always, have given with one hand and taken away with another. But on the question of 26, I would like us to say yes, because I think we should. If we're not sure, we should go for discretion. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Have we got a note of those?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a cunning plan to confuse me. Sorry about that.
Right, yeah. Councillor Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether, again, in the vein of the previous speaker, under the section about amendments to existing permitted development rights, which allow for temporary use of buildings or land for filmmaking purposes, we've got don't know as the answer to all those questions. I just wonder whether we need to reconsider that, given that not in the borough itself, but we are shortly to be surrounded by a whole bunch of film studios. Now, they may well be looking for on-location sites to film in and locations within the town. So I think that we should think about that, and particularly question 40, where it says, do you think there'll be any impact? And we've got don't know. I think that we should be saying yes, if and given the circumstance of the growth of film studios in the wider area around Reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got a note of those as well? Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else want to make any points? No, I'm not seeing anybody. So with those changes that Councillor Hornsby-Smith and Councillor Gavin read out, can we agree that we will support this response to government? Thank you very much. Which ends our early part of the agenda and takes us on to the planning applications to be considered. Now, we do have public speaking this evening, and as is usual, we will take the public speakers, the items with public speakers first, and the two items that have got public speaking are item 12, which is One Epping Close, and then also item 15, which is one of three reports on the Emma Green Golf Club. So I intend to take item 12 first, and then item 15. But as items 13 and 14 are clearly linked to item 15 because they're also regarding the golf course, I will take those after we've taken the one with public speaking. I hope that's all made clear. And then we'll go back to doing things in the order on which they're on the agenda. So on the first one that we've got public speaking on is, as I say, item 12, and I believe we have objectors Titus Halliwell and Carl Thomas, but we take the officer introduction first, and then you can come and, if you want to come and sit now in the seat where the microphones are, and then we'll listen to the officer introduction, and then we'll take your contribution. Okay, thank you very much. Right, so can we have the officer introduction now, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is agenda item 12 of the main agenda pack, which starts at page 91. This application relates to a block of 8 garages at Epping Close. It's proposed to demolish the garage block and replace with 2 3-bed dwellings. In this particular case, the fundamental harm arising from the development, as identified in the main agenda report, is considered to significantly outweigh any limited benefit that might arise from the provision of housing. This harm includes visual harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area and overdevelopment of the site, harm to the amenity of neighbouring properties, as well as inadequate amenity for future occupiers, harm to the natural environment and ecology of the site, and harm to existing parking provision through the loss of the garages, as well as insufficient parking for future occupiers. There is a brief update report which provides additional information in respect of the current garage usage, and the officer recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons as set out on pages 91 and 92 of the main agenda report. For completeness, reason for refusal 6, which relates to the loss of parking provision, should also include policy TR5 within the reason. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would you both like to introduce yourselves and say where your interest lies in this, and then we'll start to time your time. As you know, I believe you have 5 minutes between you. So have you sort of divided that up equally?
Yes, we have, Chair. So we'll try and be even less than that if we can.
Okay.
I'm conscious you're busy this evening. So my name's Carl Thomas. I'm a town planning consultant from Harwood Savin Limited.
And I'm Titus Halliwell. I'm a resident of Epping Close, and I'm one of the directors of the management company. So I'm representing the 22 flats there, plus the 9 occupiers of Fox Talbot, who has been built behind the development.
Which of you is going first? Right, when you're ready then, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. I shall be brief as I can. So I'm Carl Thomas. I'm one of the directors of Harwood Savin Limited and obviously a planning consultant. I'm here on behalf of the residents of Epping Close and the management committee of Epping Close. We submitted our detailed objection letter in February, which you'll have seen, hopefully. And it obviously talks about the loss of 8 garages and parking and all the associated things that have been covered in the very detailed report. I'd just first like to, and you might find this unusual, but as you can probably tell from my grey hair, I've done this a few times. So I'd like to compliment the case officer for producing such a detailed and comprehensive report. I work quite a lot of councils in the local area as well as in the local southeast, and it is refreshing to see such a detailed report and covered in such detail in terms of each of the various aspects of it. Also, and I note some of the discussion that was going on before I started this evening, I'd also like to congratulate you on the timescale that we are now sitting in front of you debating this, because there are plenty of other local authorities that are months and months and months behind this timescale. So that's not something you see very often, so it's very refreshing. So before I hand over to Mr. Halliwell, who's going to cover a number of points, I just want to touch on very briefly the points he's going to cover. So the original planning consent issues we'll discuss briefly, the loss of the garages and the loss of parking, the lack of visitor parking, the lack of amenity space, the loss of privacy for the 9 flats, plus the Fox Talbot Close, which you can see from the pictures, which I'm sure we'll be talking about, overdevelopment, the removal of trees, and so on. So I'm not going to get into detail of that because that's covered in somewhat detail in the case officer's report. But what I would want to just read is something here, which is very brief. It's it's a long document, but I'm just going to pick up on one little thing. So the proposed development, by reason of its location and size, still appears to be cramped on the plot. The proposal is also considered harmful to the existing future residents of Epping Close, and the proposed houses would not have adequate outdoor amenity space, and as such it would be uncharacteristic and with the established pattern of the character of the immediate vicinity, and would not enhance the conservation area at all. For reasons set out above, it is unlikely that the application will be supported. That's your pre-application advice that was given to the client in November last year. So one of the things that we do as a planning consultancy firm is quite often recommend that process because it's important to engage and discuss. And I think it's one of the officers was talking about earlier on, to have a valid discussion about it. It's just disappointing to note that despite that happening, we're sitting in front of you now with an application that has ignored pretty much all of that advice. So with that, I'll hand over to Titus.
And my sidekick has spoken rather longer than I hoped. But anyway, I have 8 points to bring to your attention. First of all, when the development was built in the 80s, one of your predecessors' planning committees thought about the conditions that the garages would be used for the amenity and the use of the residents of Epping Close. The development as proposed represents 40% loss of the parking that's currently enjoyed. So that's 11 parking spaces. 11 parking spaces that are parked on private land currently and not on the streets of Russell Street. If you go to Russell Street at midday, during the middle of the day, there's probably about spaces for 4 cars there. So we're going to have conflict there. The garages, the developer in his application suggested the garages weren't used by the residents. I can confirm that 6 of those garages out of the 8 are occupied by residents of Epping Close and are used for their amenity and benefit of their properties. The proposed planning have no visitor or contractor. They have 1 parking space per house, but we're losing 11 parking spaces in if that was approved. There's also no contingency for visitor parking or contractor parking. So as soon as a visitor turns up, we're talking about a 3-bedroom house. It's likely that those properties will have 2 cars, so we're having conflict with the neighbours in the area. Then move on to lack of amenity space. Plans there are relying on amenity space being part of a balcony, a small hard outstanding to the front, and a bit of grass to the right-hand side of the front elevation. The developer in their application has suggested that this permission will be given for the occupants to use amenities Epping Close. That's definitely not the case. Epping Close the flats are a private development and there's no permission for them to use our amenity space. If the families who move into those houses they're built, then their children will be playing on the roads. There is no amenity space that's not on public highways in that area. Our lack of privacy. 9 of the 24 flats in Epping Close will be directly affected by this development. 3 of those flats will be looking into bedrooms at an equal level. And Fox Talbot, when the development was initially proposed, wasn't built. It's now been built. There are 9 properties there, of which 7 have been occupied. They are within 4 meters.
Can I just let you know that your 5 minutes is up? So could you
Can I have 30 seconds, Chair? And then I'll be. Finally, it's over development, doesn't fit into the context of the area. The development doesn't fit in. And then the final thing, well, I've got, two things. First, the planner wants to remove some trees. They aren't his to remove or theirs to remove. They don't belong to him and they haven't got permission. And finally, I'd like to put to you, Chair, and the committee as a whole, there have been 20 objections against this planning committee raised by local residents saying that they don't want it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And can I thank you for the compliments you paid both the officer and the planning committee. We don't get that often. So, would you like to stay there and see if there are any questions from any of the committee? Has anybody got anything? Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for your explanations there. Mr. Hollowell, could you possibly just reiterate, just more for the record than anything else, if the development were to happen and these 11 cars had to go somewhere else, could you tell me about the sentiment and understanding of parking along the Russell Street area and in that entire area, or expound on that for me a bit more? Thank you.
So currently Epping Close has spaces 24 cars. The this development would remove 11 of those spaces. In essence, we have the 8 garages. We have 2 spaces to the left-hand side of the development as you look up in the land that's proposed, and then there's 3 spaces to the right. Those spaces would be removed. It's also likely some other spaces would be affected because the turning circles for cars trying to get into the parking of the proposed development would also mean that some of the other spaces would probably be affected. There is no other land within Epping Close to build additional parking on. So we would then be looking to park on the streets around Epping Close, and that'd be Russell Street. Russell Street is a parking permitted street like most of Reading is, and a lot of the residents there are in flats and multi-occupancy houses. And if you go out there during the day, most of the parking bays are already occupied by cars. So having an extra 11 cars put onto the streets is likely to cause conflict, plus whatever extra cars that development would bring if it was proposed.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing anybody else? So thank you very much for your time tonight, and obviously you'll just wait and hear the outcome, and so yeah, thank you. We would normally have the developer here to respond to what residents and so on have been saying. They have declined to take up that offer, so we can't hear from them tonight, just so people are clear about that. So I'm going to throw it open now to committee. And Karen Rowland, yes, sorry, Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I'm also very upset, unfortunately, that the developer cared not to show up this evening to understand exactly why this was one of the more maligned applications that we've had to endure in quite a while. There is, in my mind, certainly no reason that this should have come forward, despite his trying seemingly to tempt us with 2 3-bedroom houses. It just doesn't wash when you are trying to place in a cramped and one might even go so far as to say almost grotesque overdevelopment within a conservation area and impacting, as you will have heard from Mr. Hollowell and Mr. Thomas both, 11 car parking spots, 8 of which I know are directly impacted. I would also like to commend the report. Ms. Humphreys, this is certainly one of the more fulsome reports that we've gotten from you. It's absolutely wonderful. It spells out every single thing that could possibly be wrong with this, and they are all well substantiated throughout the report. I just wanted to welcome indeed section 2.1 of the update that does clearly spell out the fact that 6 of those current spots of those garages are used by Epping Close residents, as was set out in the 1978 stipulation planning permission that is written on section 7.34 that discusses that. The decision noticed included a condition back in 1978 that stipulated the garage units shall be reserved exclusively for the use of occupants of the flats hereby permitted. The reason for that condition was to provide and reserve adequate parking, garaging provision for the residents of the development. And that is really, really critical. I'm amazed indeed, therefore, that the developer actually thought that somehow squeezing something in there in a bunch of garages that are actually still currently used 30 some odd years later makes any sense whatsoever. I guess that's more than 30 years. Yes, 40 years. Yes, time goes on. At any rate, I will leave my colleague, Councillor Page, to add a few other comments perhaps about this, but I would like to certainly go with the officer's recommendation and endorse all of the points that were made in this, and say that I see absolutely, utterly no use for this area other than the garages for which they were intended and stipulated back in 1978. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I am all for more housing for people, but this ain't it. I walk up and down Russell Street on quite a regular basis, walk past Epping Close, so I know it well. Russell Street does not have the parking capability to cater for extra vehicles, and there is obviously a detrimental effect upon that, and indeed on the residents of Russell Street, who have not mentioned either, who might also want to park where they currently park. So I agree with the officer's recommendation here to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chair. In my youthful days on the council many years ago, I was involved in the campaign against this development, and it was one of a number of unsuccessful campaigns I was involved in. But one of the things we did secure was the condition that Mr. Halliwell and others, and Ethne in the report, have referred to, namely the provision of on-site garages linked to that new development. And the residents' parking scheme came along shortly after, and incidentally, the residents of Epping Close would not be entitled under our scheme rules at the moment to residents' parking permits if those garages were dispensed with for this application. So the case is well made against this application. I take a very dim view of developers who, when invited to attend a committee, choose not to. It shows the sort of contempt with which they have treated this process. I'm surprised, picking up on Mr. Thomas's comment, that they even bothered with a pre-app, because that doesn't come cheap. And having had a pretty comprehensive demolition job done in the pre-app, culminating with the sentence, for the reasons set out above, it's unlikely that an application would be supported, they then go ahead with it. But perhaps they're trying to save money by not turning up this evening. Either way, the report is a very comprehensive report that sets out the reasons that we should refuse this application, Chair. And I would just conclude by thanking Mr. Halliwell on behalf of the Management Committee and Mr. Thomas for turning up this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Not seeing anybody else, so can I see all those in favour of the officer recommendation? That is unanimous. Thank you. We now go on, as I said earlier, to the item 15, which is 17 Kidmore End Road, Emma Green, on page 243, and there's public speaking on this. And I believe the public, and we do have the applicant here as well for this one. So could we, we'll take the officer introduction first, but I believe it's Helen Lambert from Caversham District Residents Association. So if you want to come and sit at the front table, and then we'll hear the introduction and then we'll hear from you. Hope that's okay. Thank you. Right. Let's crack on with that then, and Matthew Burns is going to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. This is item 15 on page 243, the main agenda reports pack. There's also an update report for this item on page 15 of the update pack. The application relates to the former Reading Golf Club site, which was given outline permission last year for residential development of 223 dwellings. This application relates to condition 29 of that permission and seeks approval of the construction method statement, which outlines how demolition and construction activities associated with the development would be managed. A detailed construction method statement has been submitted with the application, which includes various measures by which the construction and demolition activities at the site would be controlled. This includes designated areas on site for turning of vehicles, storage and unloading of plants and materials. The CMS also includes requirements for the developer to agree noise, vibration and dust levels and monitoring with the council's environmental protection officers prior to starting works on site. The document also requires a temporary traffic regulation order to be agreed with the council's highway and street works teams prior to work starting, in order to facilitate a provision of a temporary two-way vehicle passing point on Kidmore End Road to assist construction vehicles and other traffic to access and pass the site safely. Overall, officers are satisfied that, subject to full compliance with the requirements of the CMS, then the demolition and construction activities associated with the development can be carried out in a manner which would satisfactorily protect the amenity of local land uses, neighbouring residents, character of the area and highway safety. The officer recommendations to approve the CMS and the associated documents under condition 29 as per the recommendation boxes in both the main and the agenda update reports. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, good evening, Helen Lambert. Could you introduce yourself and then we'll start to time your 5 minutes after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Helen Lambert. I'm the CADRA Chair, and I will refer to para 4.1k of the officer report. Thank you. First, I want to thank officers and Vistry for the progress to date. We've met Vistry twice on this issue, so none of this will come as a surprise. The method statement progressed yesterday to version G. I'm on version 4. So thank you for taking up some of our suggestions, but this is not yet sorted, and this has to work for several years. I want to make clear that we are not trying to block the development. We've been helping Vistry with local communication. We want to help make this work as well as it can, and to get the best possible solution to a very difficult but a foreseeable problem. Kidmore End Road is the route determined for all traffic entering and leaving the site. It is a narrow single carriageway, a bus route with 4 double-deckers an hour. It's the route to and from school for Emma Green Primary and for much of Highdown. It's the entrance point to the recreation ground. It's home to many vulnerable people. We know of 2 who use mobility scooters, in addition to all those in Lifefield Court, which is sheltered accommodation. There are several small offshoots from the road also affected. It's home to over 43 children. Victorian properties with little or no front garden and susceptible to damage from vibration. It's the only parking space for most of the homes. And most significantly, between Peppard Road and the site entrance is effectively one way only, so that vehicles have to wait to pass each other. And this is further complicated by the busy junction with Grove Road. It's quite likely to be the route for new infrastructure to be laid connecting to the site with Thames Water for clean water and sewage. There are 2 pubs and local businesses already contributing to existing pressures of parking. It's a toxic mix. We recognise the need to make progress, but it's critical that both planning and transport processes allow for a much more detailed consideration with input on local knowledge. We've been pressing for this for some time, and it should not now be caught up in the pre-election period. The officer report refers to TTRO works, and I quote, likely to entail the introduction of waiting restrictions for a short stretch to break up the length of on-street parking to facilitate a passing place along Kidmore End Road. It's not clear whether this passing place would be long enough to allow a large lorry to pass a bus. But if so, that's a very substantial loss of parking for residents who have no other option to park. Many are elderly or parents of young children, and there are already over 24 cars chasing 17 spaces and pressure on adjoining roads. And this is not for a few weeks, it's for some years. So where is the process for planning and transport to assess all available options and to take into account local knowledge and concerns? What consideration has been given to a traffic marshal to manage the inevitable conflict between pedestrians, cyclists and large vehicles trying to pass? and to liaise with the banksman at the site entrance. Vistry told us that they would employ more banksmen if needed, but they can't employ a street marshal on their own. Our overriding concern is that the children and elderly residents who use Kidmore End Road are kept safe and are disturbed as little as possible. And we would hope that the council and Vistry share that concern. On that basis, section K of the construction method statement is not yet ready to be approved without further work between Vistry and the council. It does not show that traffic calming measures are implemented before the first HGVs. It does not show that construction traffic can be managed while Thames Water or their contractors are installing new clean and foul water pipes. It does not show that procedures are being put in place for a traffic marshal between Peppard Road and the site entrance. No attempt has been made to hold discussions with the many residents whose lives will be impacted for some years and whose concern is growing rapidly. Since the last meeting with Vistry, a comprehensive informal survey has been conducted by local residents and is in the process of gathering and summarising concerns, and there has been an overwhelming response to it. Not all options have yet been considered, and we urge you not to finally approve section K before wider consideration and proper engagement with the local residents. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to stay there may be some questions. Has anybody got questions?
Chair, if I might, I have copies of what I've said, if that's helpful.
Do you want to put it with the first councillors there and they can perhaps pass it down? Thank you. While those are being passed down, are there any councillors who wish to ask questions at this stage? Not seeing any hands, so in which case, thank you very much, and thank you for providing the paper as well. And can we then have the applicants, Darren MacArthur and Alice Davison, I believe? And if you'd like to introduce yourselves and say what your involvement is, and then we'll start to time your 5 minutes. Are you going to divide it about half and half? Yes?
Yes, we will.
Right. Thank
I'm
you.
Alice Davidson and I'm a planning manager at Vistry Homes.
And I'm Darren MacArthur. I'm the technical director for Vistry Homes.
Thank you, Chair. Vistry are delighted that, having worked closely with your officers on this application, they've been able to respond to and address the matters arising, and that the application is presented to you today with your officers' recommendation to approve the construction method statement. Vistry have undertaken extensive consultation, including 2 meetings with ward councillors, 2 meetings with Keep Emma Green and Caversham and District Residents Association, a meeting with Reading Civic Society, 2 design review panels, a planning committee briefing meeting, and several on-site meetings with residents regarding trees. Vistry have taken on board all of the suggestions we have received from local residents, ward members and officers, and Vistry's project team have worked hard to arrive at a detailed and thorough construction method statement. We understand that the construction traffic is a cause for concern for the local residents, but Vistry have committed to a lot of additional measures within the CMS, and we hope that this demonstrates that we're doing absolutely everything within our means to minimise the disruption. Some of these measures include deliveries that are scheduled to arrive outside school drop-off and pick-up times, with deliveries also being staggered throughout the day. Once delivery vehicles are on site, they will be held within the site and will not be able to leave until after school drop-off and pick-up times. There will be a banksman present at the site entrance constantly during operational hours. The contact details of the site manager will also be made available in the event that the public need to get hold of the site team urgently or outside of the construction hours. Signage will be installed along Kidmore End Road to remind construction traffic of school children and to remind school children of highway safety. The schools will also be offered health and safety talks by Vistry's team. In addition, there will be wheel washing on site and regular road sweeping off site. The dust and noise from the development will also be monitored constantly. Vistry have also, at the request of local residents, set up a Facebook group which will be used to share updates on the development. Vistry are also seeking meetings with Emma Green Primary School and Highdown Secondary School to discuss the proposals and the implications for pupils walking to school. A regular meeting will also be arranged near to the site for residents and councillors to meet with Vistry as a forum for discussion during construction. Vistry are one of the country's leading house builders, delivering high quality homes and outstanding customer service across the country. For the 4th consecutive year, Vistry have been awarded a 5-star House Builders Federation customer satisfaction rating, and we're absolutely committed to delivering a high quality development at the former Reading Golf Club site, which we and the community can be proud of. Health and safety is of paramount importance to Vistry, and we wish to work with the existing community to reduce the impacts as much as possible.
I would also like to discuss further details on how Vistry will continue to proactively work closely with Reading Borough Council and its officers to try and further mitigate the impact the construction traffic will have on local residents. My background prior to working with Vistry was with a neighbouring local authority as a highways engineer for over 20 years, and therefore I fully understand the concerns that have been raised and also the processes my team will need to follow in discussion with officers to ensure that we can do everything we can to reduce the impact the development will have on local residents. As we have stated in our construction management plan, we will work closely with the Reading Streetwork Department to determine whether and where the temporary traffic regulation order can be implemented on Kidmore End Road, with the aim in providing a suitable passing point for the traffic, which would aid highway safety and also alleviate congestion issues in the area. We have also made contact with Reading's Highways Development team to identify a suitable holding location for our construction delivery traffic to further assist in reducing the possible congestion and therefore improving further the highway safety on the local streets. Lastly, we have identified an opportunity for improved communication links between all of our supply chain and our site team to ensure that deliveries can be managed on a daily basis. This could be via smartphone apps that allow both our hauliers and our site team to accurately manage delivery times to again further assist in reducing the impact on local residents. I trust the above shows how committed Vistry are to do everything we can to ensure the development is delivered safely and the impact on our local neighbours, school children and road users is mitigated as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, spot on time, thank you. Would you like to stay there and see if there's any questions from members? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. You mentioned about obviously cutting delivery times during school home time and start time. I did notice within the paperwork it says until 3:45. Now that's great for Emma Green Primary, but Highdown still is shown as open between 8 and 4 p.m. So I'm just wondering whether that could be amended as such. And also in regards to the passing on Kidmore End Road, has work taken place in terms of speaking with the transport team as to where exactly this would be? Because if you look at the road, you've got obviously the pathway and a green verge on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you've got the parking or double yellow lines, as the case may be. So for me, this is a very, very big concern to our residents in terms of the use of that road. It's narrow as it is, but it would be interesting to know what progress you've made with the transport team in terms of that. Thank you.
I'll probably take the first question, then I might pass to Darren for the second. So we're actively seeking a meeting with Highdown Secondary School at the moment as well to discuss the proposals with them. We've discussed the timings following discussion with residents, yourselves, and also officers. In terms of the times we've specified within the construction method statement, we have sought to come up with the times when there's likely to be the most children closest to the site and to allow for that. We will be, as Darren mentioned, there are some methods of communication that we are actively looking into where we can manage to an even more detailed factor the arrival and departure of our construction vehicles and our deliveries. The majority of the deliveries to site come in the morning, so there's not really likely to be many at sort of 4 o'clock. So we will be seeking meetings with the school to discuss how we can work with them. But the majority of the deliveries will be in the morning, and we will be managing that through all the measures that we've explained. We do think that the timescales that we've proposed are adequate for what we're trying to achieve here, and we will be seeking, as we said, to do health and safety school talks at the schools as well to for those secondary school children as well, that perhaps are walking as well, to make them understand the health and safety matters that they need to take into consideration. So does that answer your question? Thank you. Darren, I'll pass to you.
Thank you. And in response to the second point, I have made contact, excuse me, myself with your officer over in the Highways Development team, and proposed to arrange a meeting with both himself and colleagues in the Streetworks team on site next week to discuss the location and the size of the temporary traffic regulation order that we could implement.
Come back on that.
Yes, thank you. For me, the big concern is that on the side, you've got the recreation ground, you've got children's playing areas, you've got access to and from the recreation ground from the pathway there. So it is important that obviously, any plans made take that and bear that in consideration. Beyond the recreation ground, obviously, you've got then Lyfield Court, which is the entrance to sheltered accommodation or retirement homes. So there is very little area that one could actually build a bypass, so to speak, in, or a parking or pass by area. So that is certainly something that needs an awful lot of thought. I mean, the other area is obviously at the end of Kidmore End Road. You have traffic running up and down Peppard Road. So therefore, there is a strong feeling that if traffic is turning right, that would cause immense issues with congestion there. Now, I know in the past, I think it's been suggested to have another roundabout there, but that was dismissed based on the fact that that would add even further to congestion. So it would be interesting
Councillor
to...
Robinson, have you actually got a question for that about this?
Sorry, it was just summing up on that. Okay, but it is important that we get this right. Simple as that.
May I add something to that in response? Is that? So just to pick up on what Darren had said, we're obviously working proactively with the Highways Authority and the various teams in order to address that, and obviously that process sits outside the planning process, just to note that. Thank you.
Councillor Page.
Chair, thank you. A number of conditions reference the appointment of a site manager and an assistant site manager. Could you say when it is your intention for that to be appointed? Because if I look, for example, on page 273, contact details, helpline number should be provided. The CMF the CMS confirms that once a site manager has been assigned to the site. Now, clearly, if that site manager doesn't arrive until later, I think we would be looking for some clear indication that the site manager is going to be appointed early and will therefore be literally embedded on the site. So that's the first question relating to the site manager. And then in terms of wider meetings, paragraph L, page 267, paragraph 5.51, again, once the site manager appointed will contact the Borough Council Street Works Coordinator, meet regularly, offer blah, blah, blah. Would you have any problem with us extending that to embrace regular meetings with local organisations, members and others with whom you have already had meetings, but to load all of that onto the Street Works Coordinator is a lot, and both his work and the work that you're referencing and the site managers would, I'm sure, be assisted by regular meetings with the local organisations that you've referred to. Unless it's already in the CMS, I don't see that built in. So those are the points I'd like to raise, Chair.
Oh, sorry, shall I pick up on the second part of that? So we have added that into the CMS following our meeting that we had with yourselves recently. So we do propose to have a regular forum near to the site with residents and local groups and councillors that wish to attend. And that will be ongoing during the construction process, and we'll seek to agree outside of this process a suitable sort of time of day and things and a location for that, but we're absolutely committed to doing that throughout the construction process.
That's in the CMS.
Yes, yep, that has been updated and added in.
And sorry, if I can answer the first question in relation to the appointment of the site team and the site managers. Obviously, the initial phase of the works will be the demolition of the building itself, and then following that, we would normally have our principal contractor, our ground worker, be our main point of call on site. We will ensure that the site manager is present and appointed at a very early stage of development, and if there is a gap between that appointment, then there'll be a suitable contact, whether it be myself or a member of my team or one of the construction team, that if should any inquiries or queries come in, then we will deal with that as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for coming to speak to us. Just a couple of points. I think one of you spoke of health and safety talks within the schools. We've been talking about transport issues, traffic issues. Will it also encompass to put it bluntly, building sites aren't playgrounds type talk, because obviously they are a potentially very dangerous place. And secondly, in my younger days, I've worked on many sites like this. I don't think I've ever worked on a Vistry site, and we've talked about staggering your deliveries, so we basically don't get lorries all tailing back. But subcontractors also have their own deliveries coming in. Will they be encompassed within the scheme as well? Thank you.
I'll pick up on the first question regarding the talks to schools. So yes, we'd absolutely seek to include talking about don't go onto the construction site and explaining the dangers of that, as well as the dangers of walking around them and being careful of construction vehicles and other vehicles as well.
And absolutely, all of our subcontractors and their suppliers, their deliveries will be adhered to with the staggered delivery times as well, and it will be mentioned in all pre-start meetings that our construction and commercial team have with the appointed contractors to ensure that they adhere to the construction method statement.
And I think another point that we've picked up in the CMS on that is that when we raise orders with the various contractors on the tickets, we can specify sort of information when we first start working with them, and each time we raise an order with them, so that information about what time they're allowed to come onto site and the mechanism for doing that can all be dealt with, and we'd obviously be monitoring the construction vehicles that come on and off site as part of our health and safety processes anyway, so we can absolutely monitor what's happening on the site as we go through as well.
Right, I'm not seeing, oh, Councillor Robinson, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I was looking through the CMS. There's a few things that struck me as points of interest. In page 118 of the report, condition 31 mentions about no fires on site to burn waste. If we look at page 268, and this looks like a handout card for workmen on site, it says don't burn materials on site without approval from your project manager. That sort of like contradicts. It should be there is no burning whatsoever of materials on the site according to the earlier condition. Another anomaly, I would say, is on page 271. Again, this looks like you know, a handout to the builders. The last one in the don't undertake activities that could cause damage to nearby structures through vibration unless approved by your line manager. When would a line manager ever approve such, I suppose, work in terms of, you know, it was just something that struck me as being rather odd, but any comments that you'd like to make on those points? Thank you.
Absolutely be no fires lit on the site. There'll be no burning materials whatsoever. As Alice stated earlier on, health and safety is a huge importance for Vistry, as you can imagine. And again, the second point, there'll be no authorisation for any works that is going to impact on vibration to local properties at all.
I think, as you said, the illustration is sort of an example of something that might be up on site. So it's an image of a, you know, an example, but what's actually stated in the text of the CMS is what will be adhered to.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to ask any questions, so thank you very much for coming and taking time to go through all that with us, and I'll now throw it open to the committee to comment on the application. Councillor Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to raise the impact of construction delivery vehicles, which is a common theme in the questioning so far, and I think we can't deny that there will be a huge impact along Kidmore End Road. I welcome the developers' attempts to mitigate that with meetings and so on, and close cooperation with the community and with local ward councillors. So we welcome all that. However, I wonder, is it possible for us to I'm looking now at officers to advise here. Is it possible for us to condition or what's the other thing? Informative, but that doesn't have the weight, does it? That we would review the traffic orders after a period of time to ensure that they were addressing the issue that we're trying to. So in other words, we're talking about putting in a temporary traffic order, but we don't actually really know how effective that's going to be. We're hoping it'll be effective. We're hoping it's going to work. We're hoping there won't be congestion and so on. But it seems to me that if we built in a review period, then we could at least formally come back to that, make an assessment about whether it works or not, and then change it if necessary, or just agree to continue. Just gives us a checkpoint rather than have a period where things got worse.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We're calling in Darren Cook to answer this question, because the traffic order would be something that our highways colleagues would be looking after. So Darren, can you respond to that one?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite sure if it's something we could do from a condition on the, because we're obviously discharging the planning condition, so I'm not quite sure if we could do that. So that might be more kind of planning side, but we can obviously review with the applicant and the developer whether the temporary traffic regulation order is actually doing what we want it to do. And then we could review that and tweak it as we need to, if we needed, to make some changes. So if the developer's happy, then we could obviously do that. So yeah, I think, but I'm just not sure of the mechanism of securing that as part of this discharge of condition.
Just taking a bit of advice here.
Yes, so maybe if I can help on that. So when we normally discharge of planning conditions, we issue a decision letter that says, for this item, you've done this, that was acceptable, etc. And we can include proviso that in respect of this item, as it will be persistent over a length of time and it could be subject to other things going on, because of course there could be other developments taking place as well, with people doing their own developments, etc. That we would allow some additional reviews to take place throughout the life of it. So we could sort of put in a proviso into what you've submitted so far is deemed to be acceptable for discharge of condition, but we would also encourage you to liaise with us, or we will be liaising with you as we go on to make sure that it's fit for purpose as we go on through the development phase. Does that make sense?
Through you, Chair. I just feel that seems a little informal to me. We all stand down from planning committee, officers change and agreements get lost if they're of that informal nature. So I'd rather see something a little more formal if that's possible. I would hope all that you describe is going to happen anyway. That there will be conversation and cooperation between residents, ward councillors, developers and council officers, but it's actually putting in a review, putting in a marker to say, I don't know, after 6 months time, I would take a traffic, I don't know how long it would take, but to actually build in a review point of that traffic order, so that we would all, not us, but somebody would sit down and formally assess it.
Yeah, I can just add, I think a solution might be we could obviously understand, we can note what Councillor Gavin has asked for, and we could ask that you delegate that to officers to agree with the applicant to add a line into CMS to require them to undertake a TTRO review every 6 months or another specified period, and then we could have that in the document and ensure that takes place.
Darren, did you want to come back in as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to mention that actually with in respect to the TTRO, the TTROs do have a lifespan in itself, so they will need to be reviewed through a legal process anyway. So that there will be that option for officers outside of that, the method statement itself, so that there will be review. We could review it at that point, but obviously it'd be outside of the planning side, but officers would be able to undertake that. I think they're usually 18 months, I think, the TTROs, so they can be extended, and we can do that at that point. But those extensions, I think, are have to go through the Secretary of State for approval. But there's opportunity for us as officers to review that at that point.
18 months is a long time if it's wrong, and I would hope that we would review it sooner than that if it was clear that something wasn't working, is the point.
Yeah, I think, to you, Chair, I think it was just saying that there is a natural review process just within that time scale, but obviously we could review it within that time scale if we needed to, and obviously officers would review that if there are issues, obviously members of the public can contact the council, and we will obviously be having regular meetings with the developer, so we can review that, and where we need to tweak it, we can tweak it. But it was just to say that there is a natural cut-off if we really needed to do something, but we can do something, you know, as officers, as and when we need to.
So can I just be sure, do we need to amend the recommendations on that, or an informative, or what's the
Chair, through you, I think we've heard what the committee is after here. We understand the sensitivities. Perhaps we could have minor delegated authority for officers to work that sort of review process into the CMS as we've got it. Just looking at the developers here, just to make sure, and they are nodding at us. So
Right.
perhaps we could have that worked in place.
And then maybe keep the residents and the ward councillors informed. Councillor Carnell.
Thank you, Chairman. On the subject of the TTRO, we've heard already that parking is a premium along Kidmore End Road, 17 spaces and over 24 cars. Will the TTRO be active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or would you look to just impose the parking restrictions, I don't know, from 8 until 6, Monday to Friday?
I'm happy to answer that, Chair. What we're looking at the moment is potentially a restriction during the day only, and would be within the area that's unrestricted at the moment. There is a drop crossing within there, so it'd be, you know, we're looking at roughly around that space for a larger vehicle to get in there, and a couple of cars. But it would be something we're looking at today, or have been speaking to the developer today informally about having, you know, it restricted during the day, but would revert to parking for residents overnight, so they're not losing the parking at the peak parking time, and then that kind of allows for that movement of the larger vehicles during the day. So that's roughly what we're looking at the moment, but obviously the details we just need to look at on site and review.
Councillor Robinson, I think this is really important.
Thank you, Chair. I'm torn on this one because, yes, I like the CMS in the majority, but, you know, the question over traffic and a traffic plan that will work and work effectively is still up in the air. I think Helen is completely right in terms of what she's saying. You know, a lot of hard work has gone into this already. You know, we acknowledge that, but it is such an important thing for the residents that we need to get the traffic, you know, spot on. I think at this stage, we are some way from a happy situation on this. So would it be possible to defer this so that further work can take place in terms of building a cohesive traffic plan for this this development, and then obviously bring this back, you know, hopefully at the next committee? Is that a possibility?
Well, the next committee is not until the end of May, and I think it was Councillor Gavin who said it's going to be difficult along this road. I mean, I know Kidmore End Road well. I grew up in Emma Green. It is going to be difficult, and we need to acknowledge that. What we've got to do is work hard at minimising the disruption for residents and looking at the safety issues. And I don't see that deferring it will actually achieve very much, because until the measures that are being talked about are in place, we're not going to know how well this is going to work. So my inclination will be to say, let's try and keep the dialogue going, clearly, but we will need to build in points where we can try and improve things if things are worse than we expected and so on. And it's very, yeah, and while we talk about it in the abstract, I don't think that's going to achieve very much. I think we're only going to know when we're able to see how the measures that are proposed are actually going to work.
Thank you, Chair. It's just I have a concern about the idea of, you know, not being able to park on that road, because a lot of the residents there are retired. You know, they will not take kindly to having to move their cars during the daytime to somewhere further down the road, you know, so that this could take place. It's not feasible, I think, for many of those residents in those houses, or, you know, the Victorian terraces, to do that. That's what I'm thinking. So that's another potential challenge this faces. But, okay.
I think we all accept that there are going to be challenges. It's not going to be easy for local residents, and the sooner we, in my view, the sooner we have these things in place, so we can actually then work with the residents and the contractors in order to improve it if we can, then we're not going to do that until we've actually got stuff on the ground that we can point to and talk about properly. You're absolutely right. Of course, people aren't going to like it, and we absolutely understand that. But my view is that we need to get on and do the practical things and see how they're working. So I'm not seeing anybody else indicating. So unless officers have got anything else they wanted to add, Julie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And maybe to help Councillor Robinson, the recommendation is actually to delegate to the Assistant Director to finalise the CMS. And obviously we've had that discussion already about adding the review of the TRO into the CMS as well. And that was going to be in consultation with ward councillors. So what I would recommend, that if members can agree to that delegation, that they agree with the in the main the substance of the construction method statement, and we are still working on exactly where those passing places will be, and if we can sort of share that review with ward councillors as we go along before we issue the final CMS, would that be acceptable to members for us to proceed on that basis?
Yeah, that sounds like a good solution to me. Well, not Councillor Robinson. I'm sorry, I can't see you through Councillor Robinson. You're okay with that? Right. Okay. So can we move to a vote, taking on board all the slight amendments that have been talked about with regard to the construction method statement and TROs and so on? Can we move to a vote? Those in favour of this application? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. That was a long discussion, but it's such an important issue. I think it was right to take the time over it. Thank you. We're now going to go back to the first item regarding the previous golf club site, which is item number 13. Matt Burns again to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so this is item 13 on page 115, the main agenda pack. There's also an update on page 9 of the update pack. So this again relates to the golf club site, which was given outline permission last year for 223 dwellings. This proposal is a Section 73 application, which seeks to make a number of amendments to the approved development and the associated conditions. The proposed changes are detailed in the officer report, but include changes to the amount and composition of green and open spaces, a revised dwelling mix, revised vehicle parking arrangements, as well as changes to the energy strategy for the development. Unless shown to be amended within the recommendation box of the main agenda and update reports, all conditions and Section 106 obligations linked to the original permission would be carried across and secured under any new Section 73 permission. Any new permission issued would effectively sit alongside the existing permission, and the developer could choose to implement either. At this stage, I would say that officers are recommending an additional condition that isn't referred to in either of the reports is included for this application, and this relates to paragraph 6.104 of the main agenda report. So that paragraph refers to the fact that dwellings that are no longer proposed to be served by air source heat pumps as a result of an electricity capacity issue would be future-proofed, such that an air source heat pump could be added in the future should the electricity issue be resolved. So in this respect, officers are recommending a new condition is included that requires, prior to the commencement of any phase of the development, that it includes a dwelling without an air source heat pump, then a review of the energy supply capacity for the development is submitted to the local authority for review to establish if air source heat pumps could be incorporated with the development at that stage. Where it is demonstrated that there is not capacity, then the condition would seek that details of the future proofing of the dwellings are submitted and agreed with officers so that that could still happen in the future. Subject to that additional condition, officers consider that the changes proposed within the application would not result in a development that would materially depart from the formal development already approved. Recommendation is to approve subject to the recommended conditions and 106 obligations in the main report and the update report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Page, I think you were, and Councillor Williams.
Chair, I'm grateful to Mr Burns for his introduction. I wrote to officers, as he will be aware, on this particular issue. I'd already flagged it up, but I also did receive representations from some residents about this, and I would just make the general point, and referencing the admirable report at the beginning of this week from the National Infrastructure Commission, which referred to the government's ambition for at least 600,000 heat pumps to be installed each year by 2028. But only around 55,000 were installed in 2021. Unless that growth rate increases significantly, that target will be missed. And then they rightly say that improving the energy efficiency of homes will also reduce the use of natural gas for heating. And in the longer term, every gas boiler will also need to be replaced with a low carbon alternative, such as a heat pump. The government must urgently step up the level of ambition on energy efficiency and increase the pace of the transition to low carbon heat. And that is the overarching context within which we are faced today, a government with a fuller rhetoric but minimal delivery, a laissez-faire attitude that tolerates huge profits from the privatised utility companies, what 559 million SSEN reported last year, and a minimal drive towards delivering the infrastructure that can then underpin the sort of expansion of heat pumps that we need to see locally and across the country. Fortunately, we are looking forward to an election in the near future and hopefully a government that's committed to a green energy revolution, which will take the industry by the scruff of its neck and start getting the investment we need. But in the meantime, we are faced with applications such as this, and it's not clearly acceptable for us simply to say, throw our hands up and say, okay, we'll accept 81 dwellings with ASHP and we'll go along with gas for the rest. And I think, therefore, the condition that Matt Burns has proposed is the minimum we should be looking at, that safeguards the potential provision for the whole site in the future. It'll be some years before we get to those later phases. Hopefully then a change of government and a new environment will enable SSEN or whoever has replaced it, hopefully some nationalised industry that will then be able to deliver on the scale we need. But then we can obviously review the subsequent phases. So I welcome that amendment, Chair, or that additional condition, and would be happy to propose that formally. Thank you.
And Councillor Williams, you were next, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Just a couple of things from me. I always, of course, find myself agreeing with Councillor Page. We have a terrible government, and that condition is the bare minimum. I wonder, as I understood the condition, it would be that the buildings must be future-proof to allow future move from fossil fuels to air source heat pumps when that becomes available. Is it possible that condition says that they must make that move if the conditions allow it, rather than just saying they can make the move if the conditions allow it? In fact, they must. Anyway, a couple of other quick things. I mean, officers can think about that for a minute. A quick comment, the ecological report is not now to follow in the update pack, but condition 22 remains. Officers will decide. I was just wondering, we've had all of these conditions returned to pack. It's an incredibly sensitive site. We just saw the discussion over the last item. Is it valid that that ecological report under that condition also comes back to pack? So it's a genuine question, Chair. I'm not necessarily proposing it, but given that we've had all of the others and given the sensitivity, I think it's right we consider returning that to pack as well. I'm going to say a couple of things about the air source heat pumps because I'm going to find this very hard to support. Carbon offsetting isn't an okay thing to do. It's the last resort, or it should be. Just as Councillor Page said, new builds should be sustainable from the start. I'm also supporting the views of the Labour MP for Reading East, who agrees in his submission that new homes should have air source heat pumps and the solar panels, the PV. I'm also in agreement with KEG, who note that this is a major step away from the original approved proposal. Now, I've read the description of what falls under minor material amendments, but it does have the feel of something pretty major. And if these significant changes aren't granted tonight, I guess the development doesn't go ahead, which means the original scheme simply wasn't viable. Perhaps I was right to vote against it after all, Chair. But I do wonder if a split decision might be needed here. The KEG submission also notes the lack of sustainable buildings with the now missing air source heat pumps is a failure of the original developer to plan ahead and bother to check what was possible on the site. It's hard not to disagree. That developer and that application made promises that they simply couldn't keep. That allowed a scheme to be approved. Once approved, it's back here with changes. And we almost feel because it was approved, we have to now approve this. Our hands are tied by the original scheme. But the proposed gas boilers in, I didn't do the numbers, 150 or so houses could well still be burning for decades unless improvements happen along the way. Perhaps we do need a change of government, Chair. So why is the electricity supply not planned to be upgraded in the next few years? Why are we not delaying the development until it is? I enjoyed Councillor Page's context. I'll add a little bit, because today hundreds of UK leading scientists are urging our government to halt the licensing of new oil and gas developments in the UK. The consequences of exceeding 1.5 degrees of global heating are disaster. A quote from Emily Shuckburgh, the director of Cambridge Zero at the University of Cambridge, says, "Now is the time to be investing in the technologies of the future, not the past. Continued use of fossil fuels is a threat to us, our children and their children. Instead, we should be leading the world in creating a sustainable society powered by green innovation." Or one from Ed Miliband, for the people who remember him, he says, "Doubling down on fossil fuels is the wrong choice." So this development would be incompatible with our declared climate emergency. We know the planning inspectorate is considering climate change as a valid reason for refusing planning applications, or at least giving it weight as a material consideration. A recent decision in Ledbury stated that that development there would be contrary to the environmental role of planning in moving to a low carbon economy, giving it considerable weight in its decision. So the reduction of air source heat pumps and the resulting offset is not an acceptable way to go. The people of Reading don't want a bribe, they want a sustainable future. So I suggest this is not acceptable on those grounds, and that if necessary, the developer only builds the 81 homes which can be sustainably located in the area, which is a bit like the original policy CA1B, Chair, that suggested there was potential for about 90 homes on the site. Thank you.
Do officers want to come back on the how strongly we can word this? There's a big sigh there.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I mean, I think ultimately that is the intention of the condition, is that if there is sufficient electricity supply at that time, then a dwelling is provided with an air source heat pump. So I would think, yes, we could word that condition such that if the report comes back that there is electricity, then however many dwellings that can provide with an air source heat pump, they are provided with an air source heat pump. If that's clear.
Well, I completely understand the sentiments of the committee. What I'm struggling with, I suppose, is trying to comply with legislation that doesn't yet exist. And I agree that carbon offsetting is a very blunt tool. In this case, I think it might help us, because I think what we'd have here is a situation where the developer could get to each stage of the development, and if the technology is caught up by then, if SSE have caught up and sorted out their electricity grid, then great. We can. It would be in their interest to put in air source heat pumps as well. So that would also mean their carbon offsetting would come down. So there is a bit of flexibility in there, and I think that's the best we can move to in this circumstance with this one.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing anybody else unless. Oh, Councillor Robinson. It's when we get this technology sorted, we'll all be able to sit and see each other.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to begin by welcoming this report and thank the officers and the developers Vistry for all their hard work in bringing this paper to our committee this evening for approval. I welcome the efforts made by Vistry in relation to the application, in relation to the next element that we'll be discussing in terms of the housing proposed. I'd also like to thank Matt Rodder, as my colleague in the Greens has already mentioned, for his comments on this application. Like Matt, I oppose the idea of mass development on this site, as we both did, and former Councillor Grassop on the previous application by Gladmans on the borders of Emma Green. An application this council strongly objected to on the grounds of lack of local infrastructure and the significant impact and risk to our local community and our roads. Obviously, the first application was turned down last year. A subsequent application was submitted, and this was, in mine and many residents' opinions, regrettably and I believe wrongly accepted by this committee, despite the voices of over 4,000 local residents objecting, and the same arguments this council used to object to Gladmans still being highly relevant. At this time of the vote last year, I accepted that I would have to stand down from voting, in that I had made my views well known and was rightly deemed as predetermined. My current position is that I still believe it was a wrong decision. However, I've accepted this decision and now will work to ensure that the development is safe and that mitigations, where possible, will hopefully reduce the significant and damaging impact on our community and its overladen infrastructure. And with safety in mind, I decided to look at the old papers regarding Gladmans, and I spotted a very interesting reason and an objection for refusal that many will have overlooked. It can be found in the section relating to sustainability, and I quote, Unsustainable site as underlain by chalk mines and a fault line. Risk of subsidence and collapse. Insufficient surveys could lead to collapse. This set me thinking, so I did a lot of research into the history of Emma Green and discovered that less than a stone's throw away from the site we are now considering was a major brick making facility in Rose Hill. We know from local records that several chalk mines exist in the area, providing chalk for that industry, including the Hanover mine discovered in 1977, the extent of which is still unknown. There is also access to another mine off Kiln Road, which was used to store government documentation during the Second World War, the entrance of which is by the Scout Hut. Jane Walton, a local historian and geologist, stated that there are probably many more mines in our area that remain hidden, with no official records and lost to time. In nearby Grove Hill, a major collapse occurred back in '82, as well as other incidents of subsidence and sinkholes in Emma Green dating back many years. Reading and its suburbs, such as Emma Green, may have many undiscovered mines. In fact, Caversham is named as such because it was once Cave's home. My particular concerns were heightened when I reread the GeoPhys reports and archaeological surveys done on the land commissioned by Fairfax. These appear to have not gone deep enough, as the archaeology reports seem to have uncovered evidence of it being used as a golf course for the last 100 years. No mention of close proximity to the brickworks in the history or any major reference to the chalk course or possibility of caves or chalk mining being prevalent in the area. Obviously in history, King Charles I hid in a...
Oh, Councillor Robinson.
Point of order, Chair,
No,
this is not
no.
relevant.
No,
This is
no,
now-
just hear me out.
I take the
All
point
right.
about chalk mines.
If any
but-
further evidence is needed that there may be workings beneath or close to the land, I would ask you to consider the name at the north of the land, Tanner's Lane. This indicates that a tannery may have once operated in the area, in the same way that Kiln Road relates to the brick making.
Can I
And
suggest
back
that
in the
you
old
submit
days,
the suggestions to the naming
yeah,
officer?
I'm just coming to the pertinent points. All right. So, in terms of, all right, this indicates a tannery. So, where did the chalk come from? The next village along is Chalk House Green, possibly indicating a link. And finally, in the land survey on the golf course, it was mentioned that evidence of landfill existed in the north part of the site. Why? This was an agricultural land. Could this be evidence of possible earthworks or even a possible mine? A LiDAR scan of the site also shows an interesting possible fault line running north to south and possible track from the north of the site to Kidmore End Road.
Councillor Robinson, please, could you bring your...
All right,
It's
all
not
right.
material
I'm
for a
just
planning application.
pointing
Really, it's
out.
not.
I'm pointing out the fact that you know, this area where this golf course exists, you know, is known for having chalk caves and chalk mining. What I would like to see is, can I ask, has proper and due consideration to the site been given in relation to what may lay beneath? Can thorough surveys similar to those used in Coley to search for other chalk mines following the Field Rose collapse in 2000?
Come on, Councillor
I'm aware that
Robinson,
cone testing is...
Councillor Robinson, please,
look,
can I ask you to finish your comments,
Yeah,
please?
I would be failing if I did not put forward these potential risks, as it is a significant risk. All right. Okay, I appreciate that, but...
Chair, can I move that the vote be put on this?
I've got one more speaker, which is Councillor Moore's been waiting very patiently through that.
May I speak? Thank you. I wasn't, unlike Conservative members of Parliament in the House of Commons, I wasn't aware you could filibuster a planning application, but I think Councillor Robertson made a very good fist of it. I don't know how to quite follow that. I'm a little bit, my mind is slightly frazzled. I think I was not a councillor for when this application previously passed, but I feel like the horse is somewhat bolted from this subject. I'm disappointed, like Councillor Williams has said, about the carbon offsetting, which I think is a rather blunt tool to achieve what we want, although I take the case officer's comment about the electricity supply, and that may well come back. This is a very difficult one, a very large one to do, and I will consider things carefully, but I just want to kind of say what I need to say. But I won't carry on anymore, otherwise I'll be here forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to take Councillor Bates' suggestion, put this to the vote with the addition of the comments from Councillor Page, and indeed on the, I can't remember what number it was, perhaps you could remind me, Matt. I wanted to add it to that condition or make it as a completely separate.
This is a new condition.
Completely new, okay. So, could you just remind us of the wording so that people know?
Yeah, so I think we would probably ask for delegated authority to agree the exact wording of the condition, but the intention is prior to each phase that includes a dwelling that currently wouldn't have an air source heat pump, we obtain a review of the energy situation from the developer. If it's apparent that the electricity position has changed and air source heat pumps can be provided to more dwellings, then those are secured. If the position hasn't changed, there isn't the power, then we would obtain details of the future proofing for the dwellings to allow it to still happen in the future when possible.
Right, can I see all those in favour of approving this application? Are there any again? Oh, sorry. Did your hands go up on the back of the, can we just do that again? Sorry, because hands were going up in all directions. Right, can I see all those in favour of approving this application? With the additional condition, right. And can I see all those against? Councillor Williams, and those abstaining? Nobody. Okay, thank you. That is carried. And can we now please go on to the final report on the former golf club site, which is item 14 on page 181.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there's also an update report for this item on page 13 of the update pack. So this application seeks approval of the reserved matter of the outline permission, which relates to the appearance of the development. The appearance details that have been submitted actually relate to the revised development layout, which has just been considered under the variation application. The appearance details that are proposed are considered to demonstrate a development of high design quality, and that has been well considered. There is subtle variation in the dwelling design proposed, as well as in use of materials indicated. Officers think this would ensure the development integrates with, maintains the character of the local area. Officers consider the proposals do respond positively to local distinctiveness. The appearance details for open spaces and associated apparatus within the development are also considered to demonstrate an overarching high quality of public realm and a green infrastructure that would run through the site. Officers consider the appearance details that have been submitted are acceptable. The recommendation is to approve the reserved matter as per the recommendation in the main agenda report. It's pertinent to note that details relating to specifications of matters such as materials, hard and soft landscaping, boundary treatments, things like that would still need to be agreed under the relevant conditions of the outline permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gavin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report. I wasn't on planning committee when the original plan was, the outline plan was approved, but was familiar with the controversy around it. But I have to say, I was absolutely delighted to see this, the layout, the plan, the appearance. I think this is a high quality development. I like the character areas. I like the use of different styles of brick and colours. And it isn't just about what I like, is it? But it creates a unity, but yet distinct areas. The changes in the slight variations in roof lines and types of roof and windows will mean that it's not something perhaps that I was familiar growing up in the 70s, the 60s and 70s with those uniform housing estates, where every house looked exactly the same. This is not how this is going to look. And I think that will enhance it, and it will be a high, from the information we have, will be a high quality development from that point of view. I note that we still need to approve the details of the exact materials to be used and the boundary treatments. But the retention of on the new plan, the amendments, the retention of the existing boundary, trees and vegetation, and the changes in the open space arrangements from the original plan means that this will have a very green, open feel, I suspect. Maybe not initially, because trees, and there's lots of new trees to be planted, which has to be a good thing, and they take time to mature, obviously. But there are lots of the old trees which are retained, and certainly along the boundary. So all in all, I think this is, given we're not revisiting, as Councillor Robinson seems to want to do, the original decision, this development has been given permission. What we're doing here this evening is making sure that it's the best development that we can produce, given that it already has outline permission. We're not revisiting whether this is a good thing or not. It's happening. But I think that the developer has gone a long way to thinking carefully about the design and designing something which I think will be a real credit to North Reading when it's built.
Thank you. Anybody? Councillor Robinson. I hope this is about this application.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is. I just want to say I'm in full agreement with Councillor Gavin. I've been to view this, the presentations on a number of occasions. I like what is proposed and certainly happy with it. I was not, in my previous discussion, wanting the change to be made or going back to the beginning. What I was trying to secure was that there is safety as well in terms of actually revisiting the GeoFIS. That's all. It was about making the site and the future houses safe, because it does need looking at. Thank you, Chair.
Right, anybody else? No, okay, can we move to the vote on this then, please? All those in favour of granting this application? Thank you, that is unanimous. Right. We've spent a lot of time on that, but we're now going on to item 16, which is the Drew site that we deferred last time. Sorry, sorry, I've forgotten the beginning. Sorry, it's getting late. We need to do Oxford Road 109B on page 69, which is another old favourite. And I think, Ethne, you're going to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. This is agenda item 10 of the main agenda pack, which starts at page 69. This application seeks planning permission for a replacement shopfront and kitchen extraction system, as well as the use of the site as a restaurant with ancillary takeaway. In February this year, officers were made aware that a new flue had been installed at the site that was not shown on the proposed plans. As detailed in the main agenda report, the flue is not considered acceptable in design and heritage terms, and there is also uncertainty as to whether the flue actually works to control odour. In this respect, planning and environmental protection officers have visited the site since the installation of the flue, and cooking smells are still significantly noticeable. Officers have spent a significant amount of time dealing with this application to secure an acceptable shopfront and a working kitchen extraction system. However, this has not been possible, resulting in the recommendation to refuse. Members are advised that there is an existing enforcement notice as referred to in the main agenda report in respect of the unauthorised shopfront, extract and use. Whilst it's not considered appropriate to discuss the detail of enforcement action in this forum, the extant enforcement notice will form the basis of future enforcement action as required. As noted in the update report, there is an acknowledged concern regarding advertisements on the side elevation of the property adjacent Zinzan Street. These advertisements have deemed consent under the advertisement regulations and would need to be dealt with separately under those regulations, which is beyond the scope of the application currently being considered. It is noted, however, that the current proposed plans do show the removal of this signage on this elevation, which could have been controlled by condition should the application have otherwise been supportable. On the basis of the current application, the officer recommendation is that the application be refused for the reason as set out on page 69 of the main agenda report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Rowland, all those ages ago, declared an interest on this, but was asked to address the committee before she leaves the room. So do you want to go and sit over there, Councillor Rowland? Yeah, just to make it clear that you're not speaking as a committee member.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I declared an interest on 109B Oxford Road when this first came back a number of years ago now, as I live within 65 meters of the site. I will try to be brief. I am supportive of the officer's recommendation in this situation for a number of the reasons that she substantiated in, again, another very good and thorough report. There have been ongoing situations regarding the appearance within the conservation area, the effect of the appearance, the conservation area, even going back along Zinzan Street where it runs for quite some meters and has advertising all the way back down the street. And then, of course, the odor, which frankly, when this was passed initially, we were not expecting. But over the years and through the fact that we have had an enforcement notice since 2020, there have been back and forth by the organization to try to right the situations and to try to overcome the reasons for the enforcement. After all of this time, unfortunately, this has not worked, and I will draw to members the fact that in section 4.5, it highlights the letters and the comments of the upper floor tenants complaining of a terrible stench all day, nights, weekend, because of the new flue that has been put up to, again, try to mitigate the odors from going down the street, which in turn took the flue, if you will, try to understand this, took the flue and then turned it back around towards all of the residents living above. So the flue, instead of coming out, goes entirely back around. It's probably a little bit difficult to see. So the restaurant has chosen to attempt to take care of the odors in that fashion. I can assure you that when the wind blows, as Ms. Humphreys noted, officers were there after this flue that's gone back over the roof was there. They still noticed the odor on the street. So I will leave it to you all to determine. The restaurant has had many years to rectify this and many years to understand that that improvements needed to be made and has yet to fulfill that. And that is a real shame, because we do want to be supportive of independent businesses, But I think, and I feel that they all need to play their part in abiding with the rules that we've set forward. So with that, I will leave. Thank you.
Okay, I'll throw it open to committee. Councillor Page.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Paragraph 1.1 makes the point that this was formerly a betting shop and it was closed, and there was considerable gratitude in the local area when it did close, because it was the location of quite a bit of antisocial behaviour. What we now have is antisocial behaviour from the current occupants, and we had a meeting back before Express Team opened. They sent down representatives. They're a big national organisation. This isn't some small local independent operation, boasting about all the experience they'd had about running these places, about how it would be a high standard. They would comply with the littering, they would comply with extraction requirements, and everything would be nirvana in the locality. Well, would that have been the case? They gave us a lot of bogus promises that have not been delivered. And I'm grateful to planning officers, environmental health officers that have had to spend, frankly, far too much of their valuable time on dealing with this rogue operation. And the litany of breaches are highlighted in terms of the design and heritage on page 76. And then if you turn the following page, page 78, you have this unauthorized, the latest version of the unauthorized flue. And you can see with the red arrow there, this is not some small thing. This is a huge flue. It's actually about 3 times the size of the previous one. And it too is operating in a substandard way. Now, it is quite possible to run a takeaway with an extraction flue and not cause any nuisance. They operate throughout Reading. How many of you have takeaways in your wards where extraction systems are operating quite happily, where we don't get the complaints that we have here? So it can be done. The reason it's not be done is because we've got cost-cutting incompetence from the company responsible for that. And we therefore have been exceedingly, I would criticise officers perhaps for being far too lenient over the recent period, but we've now reached a position where we have to say thus far and no further. And that is the basis upon which we are rightly being recommended to refuse the planning permission. There may well be enforcement issues to discuss. It's not appropriate tonight. They are referenced in the report. They will have the full support of local members, because we wish to see an operation that benefits the locality and passers-by, but without the environmental detriment that we are currently suffering in that area. So I warmly welcome the recommendation, Chair, and propose that we formally endorse that.
Anybody else want to speak on this? No? Can I put it to the vote then? All those in favour of refusing this application? Thank you, that's unanimous. Would somebody mind getting Councillor Rowland back, please? Councillor Page. Right, we now are going on to item 16, which is another one that was deferred. Sorry, oh gosh, yes, beg your pardon. I know, you know why, I'm looking at the update pack list rather than the actual agenda, which isn't very sensible of me. Apologies. Right. Who's introducing this one? Natalie, sitting there patiently.
Hello, good evening. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, thank you.
The application is for 26 to 90 Reading Bus Garage, and it's to put solar panels onto the roof and which will increase the economic efficiency and help in terms of climate change targets to generate more solar electricity to power the bus service. It is located next to the railway line at the rear, and therefore the Network Rail has been consulted, and they have given no objections, however have recommended that a basic asset protection agreement is undertaken. The agent has confirmed that this is being investigated and will be actioned, and as such I have made it an informative, because it's not part of the actual planning process itself, that is acquired before any works are completed. I'm therefore recommending approval.
Thank you very much. Councillor Page.
Chair, just to quickly, we of course own Reading Buses, and throughout its history it has been pioneering all sorts of environmental improvements, mainly in the fleet, and I won't remind colleagues of the good progress made there. But the installation of solar PVs has been an ongoing achievement, and one that we should welcome as the owner of Reading Buses, and it will make a further contribution not only to the operations of our impressive bus company, but also the wider environmental benefits. So I would commend this to colleagues, Chair.
Seeing anybody else, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Now,
thank you, Chair.
Go on to item 16. Sorry about that. It's on page 289, and John Mark was going to introduce this. And could I just remind you, we did have a very long discussion about this last time, and the reason it was deferred was to have further discussion about the nature of the social housing on site, and so that's what we should be focusing on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that introduction, which has saved me a few seconds. So following discussions with the applicant, the applicant advised that they're not actually seeking to alter the affordable housing offer from that specified within the original report.
Sorry, John, I don't know whether it's where your microphone is. I'm having a bit of trouble.
But they've submitted better, information to basically evidence their position, which is included in full Appendix A of the update report. So that explains that introducing rented units would result in a reduction of on-site provision from 8 to 3 units, without this further worsening the current viability position. The applicant advises that 8 registered providers have specified that it would not be feasible to provide rented units in the scheme within that context. Furthermore, altering the mix of units would generally reduce the on-site provision possible from 8 to 0. So various specialist officers have considered the additional information submitted, and it is agreed that first, the current offer represents the best opportunity for maximising on-site affordable housing. Secondly, that there's little prospect of securing rented units in this particular instance. And thirdly, that the proposed mix has been suitably justified. And as such, full permission is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and the Section 106 obligations summarised within the main report from the 1st March meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lang. Sorry,
couldn't see the wood for the trees.
No,
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
I thought Councillor Rowland was indicating as well, but right, okay.
I thank Officer Markwell for obviously this was deferred. We praised the application compared to the previous application. We just wanted it to be deferred to look at the housing mix and see whether we could get any RER provision on it. I'm pleased with the additional information. It's full and comprehensive. I also thank the developer for getting back to us. I am slightly disappointed that 8 providers, 9 if you include RBC, were not willing to take on 2 rented flats, because they said it wasn't feasible. The feasible was to do with the physical separation. I recognise that shared ownership is an affordable product, but sometimes providing affordable homes and getting it through planning is like walking through treacle, swimming through treacle, as we can see with previous developments with substantial affordable housing on it, can sometimes struggle. I will round off with, so it's a good application. I'm glad, I'm pleased to see the Drews building being kept, and it does provide affordable, but I would like to just say a quote from Lewis Silkin. No doubt Tony was around when he was minister. I do not want to see better off people to go to the right and the less well off go to the left. I want to see them ask each other, are you going my way? So that's the principle. We just want some affordable housing where everybody lives together and there isn't the physical separation that they need to have rented accommodation in mixed units. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I raised this point somewhat last time, but as we're actually going to vote on it this time, there was a lot of talk at the beginning of today's committee around how important heritage and conservation was, and it was praised heavily, especially by Councillor Lang. Yet we are still proposing to demolish 2/3 of a locally listed site, which is still not, which is somehow contradictory of everything we said at the beginning of the meeting. So I'm not especially happy with that, and especially what we as a committee are saying is contradicting each other within the same committee meeting. So I just want to raise that point again, and I'm disappointed, like Councillor Lang is, with even though there's lots of information, that we haven't got what we kind of hoped for from the last meeting. Thank you.
Just to remind Councillor Moore, I know he wasn't on the committee at the time, but we were originally faced with the complete loss of the building, and we overturned officer advice and went to appeal and won. And the developer, to his credit, has worked with us and not sold on and run away from it. And whilst it obviously still entails some loss, this is a much better deal than that which we were originally offered. And I think we as a planning committee can be pleased with that. And I'm grateful to the developer for having provided the subsequent information. As Councillor Lang rightly says, it's regrettable that I mean, it sets out the discussions with other registered providers, again, which is very helpful. So on that basis, Chair, I would propose that we agree the recommendation in front of us this evening.
Thank you. Not seeing anybody else, so can we move to a vote? Those in favour of granting this application? Those against? Any abstentions? For one, thank you. Right, thank you. And then we go on to the last application, which is 124 Whitley Wood Road, and I believe Gary Miles is going to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair.
Wait, but...
yeah, this one came to light because it's an RBC owned application at 124 Whitley Wood Road. The property is owned by RBC and a tenant requires a driveway. The application is for a hard standing area and a footway crossing across a section of grass verge that's owned by the council. The application is considered acceptable in terms of character and highway matters, and as such recommended for approval as per pages 379 to 384 of the main report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody want to say anything? Councillor Lang.
Well,
Go ahead.
I think I will say a little word as it's in my ward. Thank you, Chair. And of course, I support this application. Thank you very much.
All right. In favour of this application? Right. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very
Chair, I
much.
just wanted to welcome the new planning persons this
Oh.
evening. So, and that's Gary for your first planning application to the committee. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yes, very remiss of me, but, and I'm sorry you had such a long wait.